Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Thank you for your time this morning.
Appreciate it, Greta.
The piece is the April edition of Wired magazine about the NSA's biggest spy center, building the country's biggest spy center. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
That does it for today's Washington Journal. We'll be back tomorrow for more at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you.
Back to Speaker Pro Tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 17, 2012, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for the morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with each party limited to 1 hour and each member other than the majority or minority leaders and the minority whip limited to 5 minutes each. But in no event shall the debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Chandler, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm the proud sponsor of a resolution congratulating the University of Kentucky men's basketball team for winning the 2012 NCAA championship. Since the days of Adolph Rupp, the University of Kentucky Wildcats have been a part of the fabric of our Commonwealth, and the success of this year's team will be remembered for generations to come. The University of Kentucky boasts one of the proudest and most celebrated basketball programs in the whole country. As an alumnus, I may be biased on this point, but I also believe that the statistics speak for themselves. The UK Wildcats are the winningest team in the history of college basketball and have won the second most national championships. They've appeared in more NCAA tournaments and won more games in the tournament than any other team. Even in the great tradition of Kentucky basketball, this year's team was special. They shattered the NCAA record for shots blocked and set a new record for single-season wins with 38 victories. The Wildcats dominated the NCAA tournament with a combination of explosive offense, suffocating defense, and team chemistry. This season wouldn't have been possible without head coach John Calipari, known far and wide as Coach Cal. Although known as a skilled tactician and recruiter, the key to Coach Cal's success has always been how much he cares about his players. He mentors these young men so they're primed to succeed both on and off the court, and I think I can speak for all Wildcat fans when I say that we hope to see him on the sidelines at Rupp Arena for many years to come. From top to bottom, every member of this team played an important role in their drive to the championship. But there are 3 players in particular that deserve special recognition. Anthony Davis had one of the most remarkable college basketball seasons in recent memory, winning 8 National Player of the Year awards and setting an NCAA record for most blocks in a season by a freshman. Michael "Kid" Gilchrist was unquestionably the heart and soul of the team. And Darius Miller, a native of Mason County and former Mr. Kentucky basketball, ended his stellar career on a high note by setting a school record for most appearances in a Kentucky uniform and joining the prestigious 1,000-point club. Finally, this team was supported every step of the way by its fans, the Big Blue Nation, who made Rupp Arena one of the toughest places to play in the country. They proved time and time again why Kentucky is the best state for college basketball. This year was an especially proud year for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, as we sent 2 teams to the Final Four. I want to congratulate the University of Louisville Cardinals and head coach Rick Pitino on an outstanding season and a hard-fought rivalry game that lived up to its immense hype. I also commend the University of Kansas and the Ohio State University on their terrific years and for making it all the way to New Orleans. As the member privileged to represent the University of Kentucky, I am honored to introduce this resolution today, and I look forward to welcoming the Wildcats to Washington next month. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the remainder of my time.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Flores, for 5 minutes.
Request unanimous consent to address the House.
revise and state my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate Coach Kim Mulkey and her Baylor University Lady Bears for winning the 2012 Women's NCAA College Basketball National Championship. The Lady Bears were ranked #1 in the country all season long, going undefeated and becoming the first NCAA basketball team, men's or women's, to ever win 40 games in a season. The Lady Bears recorded some impressive team and individual accomplishments on their way to their second Final Four in 3 years and winning their second national championship in 7 years. The Lady Bears senior class, Taryn Condrey, Ashley Field, and Lindsey Palmer, finished their 4-year careers with a record of 131 wins and 19 losses, 1 national championship, 2 Final Four appearances, 4 NCAA tournament trips, 2 regular season Big 12 titles, and 3 Big 12 tournament titles. Ashley Field, Lindsey Palmer, and Mackenzie Robertson were all chosen as first-team 2012 academic All-Big 12 honorees. Odyssey Sims, Destiny Williams, and Brittany Griner were named to the 2011-2012 All-American team. After dominating opponents on both ends of the court all season long, Griner was chosen as the NCAA Tournament MVP and became the third women's basketball player to ever win all 4 National Player of the Year awards. The Lady Bears are led by the remarkable head coach Kim Mulkey, whose resume and accomplishments have already cemented her place among the best women's basketball coaches of all time. As a player, Coach Mulkey was a member of the 1984 gold medal winning U.S. women's basketball team. She was inducted into the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame in 2000 and has been named Big 12 Coach of the Year 3 times. This year, Kim was named National Coach of the Year. Coach Mulkey is the fastest women's basketball coach to ever reach 300 wins and is the 5th coach in the NCAA to win multiple national championships. She has led the Lady Bears to the NCAA tournament in 11 of her last 12 seasons at Baylor. The Lady Bears return their top 6 scorers and rebounders next season, so there is more to come from this outstanding group of young women. I am privileged to represent the city of Waco, McLennan County, and Baylor University in my district, and I wish best wishes to Baylor President Ken Starr, Athletic Director Ian McCall, and everyone else in the Baylor Nation as they continue to show that a Christian institution of higher learning can indeed compete and win on the in college athletics as well. 2011 and 2012 has truly been the year of the bear. Sick 'em Bears.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Sarbanes, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, the genocide of more than 1.5 million Armenians by Ottoman-era Turkish authorities is an undeniable fact of history. In 1915, the Armenian nation, which had resided in Anatolia for thousands of years, was subjected to an organized barbarity that included death marches, drowning, and executions. Those who managed to survive these horrors scattered to the 4 corners of the earth. Today, survivors of the Armenian genocide and their children and grandchildren bear witness to this massacre. Each year, Armenian Americans, supported by others who readily accept the teachings of history, renew their plea that the United States government formally recognize the Armenian genocide. And every year, that responsibility of recognition remains unfulfilled. When faced with the deeply compelling research and scholarship surrounding the Armenian genocide, it is wholly untenable to assert that the genocide did not occur. Instead, many in Congress offer the protest that recognition would harm our relationship with Turkey and undermine our broader geostrategic interests. Others suggest weakly that it is just not the right time to push the issue of recognition. The result is the same: continued failure on the part of the United States to do the right thing. This failure puts salt on the wounds of the Armenian people, but it does more than that. It corrodes the moral standing of our nation as a whole. I join those who once again at this time of annual remembrance implore my fellow members of Congress and President Obama to formally recognize the Armenian genocide. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Quigley, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, the #1 fear of Chicago elementary school children is not braces or book reports or the dentist. It is getting shot. More than 500 Chicago students were involved in gun violence in the last 2 years, and 34 were killed by guns last year. In a single week in June, there were 60 shootings in Chicago. Chicago police trace many of the guns used in these type of shootings to gun shows in neighboring states. You can go to a gun show in a neighboring state, Indiana, and buy any weapon you want without a single background check. You can be a convicted felon or domestic abuser under a restraining order or a suspected terrorist and walk right into a gun show and walk out with an assault weapon. A member of Hezbollah purchased weapons at an American gun show the day before 9/11. Is this what the American people want? Do the American people approve of a situation where terrorists can buy guns without even the level of tracking we use for airplane tickets or cold medicine? The American people want our law enforcement officers to have the tools they need to catch the bad guys. 81% of gun owners support requiring a background check on all firearm purchases. 90% of all Americans favor strengthening databases to prevent the mentally ill from buying guns. 69% of NRA members, that's NRA members, support closing the gun show loophole. So why aren't we acting on these areas where there is such overwhelming public support? Well, the majority has its rally to base, and the NRA has to send more urgent appeals for support based on imagined threats. So this week we're courageously protecting bullets from harmful regulation by the EPA, because a little lead in the water never hurt anyone, right? The bill also gives sportsmen the right to stand their ground against polar bears. Anyone who opposes vigilante justice against this Arctic menace is clearly a gun-grabbing communist. All this would be funny if the same mentality wasn't being used by the NRA against our nation's youth. 25 states have passed stand-your-ground laws, declaring open season on anyone considered threatening to anyone at any time. These laws were not passed because of public demand for them. They were passed because the NRA teamed up with some of the largest soft drink manufacturing and retail corporations to push for these laws. Why soda companies would support the efforts to pass these laws is beyond me. But the impact is a 17-year-old buying one of their sodas is now under a much greater threat. Let's have a reality check. Let's take action on one of these areas where there is clear, overwhelming support. I sat in this chamber and listened to Mexican President Felipe Calderon plead with Congress to close this loophole that fuels violence between the cartels in his country. But as the NRA president himself pointed out, Congress has done nothing. We hold hearings to point out that the ATF lacks leadership, but to continue to block the appointment of a director. We talk about the need to enforce the laws in the books, but look the other way as those laws are ignored at gun shows. We stop suspected terrorists from boarding airplanes, but not from buying 30-round clips. All this is based on the fantasy that denying terrorist assault rifles is the first step to national gun confiscation. The Supreme Court answered that in the D.C. and Chicago handgun cases. The court found that there is an individual right to bear arms. It is a limited right, subject to local control, but it is a right. That is now settled law. So the people who make their living scaring gun owners have to resort to conspiracy theories to keep the donations coming. Now is the time to move past the Beltway extremists and listen to the American people. Are these tough votes? Maybe, but that's what we are sent here to do. I want to mention Blair Holt, a Chicago high school student, son of 2 lifelong public servants. Blair was riding a bus on his way home from school when a gun was pulled on his friend. He stepped in front of the gun and was shot to death protecting his friend. I ask my colleagues to think of that next time they want to claim they can't do anything about gun violence. Blair Holt was willing to take a bullet for a friend. Shouldn't we be willing to take a tough vote for our children? Thank you, and I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Holt, for 5 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, my colleagues who were members of this body some 10 years ago may recall my coming to the floor on behalf of my constituents, the Hassan family of Milltown, New Jersey, Duri, Nida, Asna, Anam, and Ikra Hassan. They lost their husband and father, Waqar Hassan, on September 15, 2001, 4 days after the tragic events of September 11th. That night, an angry man walked into Waqar's convenience store in Dallas, Texas, ordered 2 hamburgers, and shot the 46-year-old husband and father in the face. This was not a robbery gone awry. It was a deliberate act of hate based on Waqar's heritage and physical appearance. When asked by police why he shot Waqar, the shooter expressed no remorse. He said, "I did what every American wanted to do but didn't." When Waqar Hassan came to the United States from Pakistan in 1993, he did so in search of a better life for his family. After working in New Jersey, he took an opportunity to run a store in Texas and was going to bring his family to join him after he was established. The Hassans epitomized the hardworking, optimistic spirit that immigrants always brought to this country. They were on the path to permanent residency and eventually American citizenship when Waqar lost his life for no other reason than that he was a Muslim and the murderer thought Waqar had a Middle Eastern face. It looked at that time as if Waqar's death ended the family's path to citizenship. The widow and 4 school-aged girls were subject to immediate deportation. After exhausting all legal and administrative options to allow Duri, Nida, Asna, Anam, and Ikra to remain in the United States, I determined that a private bill was the only possible course of action. Finally, in 2004, Congress passed and President Bush signed this private bill into law, giving the family a path to their dream. A few weeks ago, the Hassans took their oath of U.S. citizenship in our New Jersey congressional office. These 5 remarkable women had endured a long, arduous pathway from tragedy to citizenship. They formally tied their futures to the United States of America. In a real sense, though, this naturalization ceremony was about the United States of America as much as it was about these 5 women. These 5 women were tied to America long before they took their oath. They considered themselves Americans, and the United States of America had an obligation to them for many years. At the ceremony, we saw hope coming out of tragedy, a fair result out of an insane injustice, and compassionate concern out of impersonal laws and regulations. The United States intends to provide and strives to give hope, fairness, and compassion. But these are not automatic. Cruel fate or happenstance often threatens to crush hope and opportunity. Irrational human passions and prejudices can thwart justice and fairness. The demands of life in a busy, complicated society and the exigencies of a complicated legal code can crowd out compassion. In 2001, all across America, Americans reacted in dismay when they heard the news of the hate crime, when they learned that the murderer committed his brutality in retaliation for September 11th attacks in an act of twisted patriotism. They knew it was a blot on our country. Americans felt the pangs even more deeply when they learned that Waqar Hassan left behind a struggling widow and 4 little girls. For most Americans, that was the end of the story as they went back to their busy lives. They thought the wheels of justice will turn and take care of this. They didn't think about the United States' obligation to this family, nor did they consider how impersonal the law can be. On March 16th, finally, hope, fairness, and compassion prevailed. It was wonderful and heartwarming. The people of America and our government have an odd attitude toward immigration and immigrants. Often forgetting our own origins and even our own best interests, we resist diversity and even lash out at others like ourselves because we mistakenly think they are not like ourselves. Our country has a founding commitment and a history of openness, punctuated, I must say, with instances of rejection, bias, and hatred. The historical record is very clear, though, that openness toward immigrants and policies of inclusion have greatly benefited us. Human prejudices sometimes break through. We see it even today. But with this oath of citizenship, the aspirations of Waqar Hassan for his family were realized. We mustn't forget that year by year, over the centuries, the United States of America has moved by means of laws to overcome these prejudices of humans and the impersonal forces of society to create an opportunity and to create fairness. We must lift our lamp by the golden door, but also keep the door and our hearts open.
Recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
I desire to address the House for 5 minutes to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Houston Chronicle reports today that a proud father announced over his Facebook page that his baby was born. The baby was born on April the 14th, 2012. Baby weighed 6 pounds, 15 ounces, was 20 inches long. A proud father announcing the arrival of his baby. I regret to say, Mr. Speaker, that the Chronicle goes on to report that on yesterday, the mother of this child, while taking the child in to receive medical attention, was killed. A proud father announces the arrival of his baby. The mother is killed days later. What kind of country are we becoming? I don't know what the motive is for this, but I do know the results. I know that a baby will not have its natural mother there to care and to nurture. I know that the mother won't be there on the first day of school, won't be there to see the first step that the child will take. The mother won't be there to turn on the light and protect the child from the creatures of the night, to pitch the ball and catch the child after a fall. I don't know what the motive was, but I know that a mother won't be there when the child walks across the stage to graduate from high school, when the child is married and the first child is born to the next generation. The mother won't be there. Regardless as to what the motive is, we must stop this senseless violence. I don't know what the race of the perpetrator was, but I do know this. People of goodwill want to see this person prosecuted, and I want to see this person prosecuted to the fullest extent that the law permits. This senseless violence has to stop. Prosecution alone won't do it. I think we do have to say more and do more and let the country know that this is not the America that we see in our future. We have got to condemn all of this senseless violence. This senseless violence goes beyond race. It goes beyond status. This senseless violence has to be denounced by every one of us, and every one of us tries to do it as regularly as we can. I just want to join the choir of people who are saying that we will not tolerate it. We demand prosecution, and we understand that we must end this foolishness, because if we don't end it, it will be our end. I yield back the balance of my time.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The rising cost of health care is one of the most difficult policy decisions and budget challenges that we face as a nation. The problem will continue to grow unless we act. Rather than cutting care for the most vulnerable, however, we must develop smart ways to contain costs. A great example of this type of innovative approach is something that I'm proud to describe for you, and it's happening in my district. The program is called Hennepin Health Program, and it's in Hennepin County, Minnesota. And it's run by the county, Hennepin County, and it integrates care for individuals with the highest need. So low-income, poor individuals needing health care can be very expensive to treat because they end up going to the emergency room as they don't have a regular care provider, and yet the Hennepin Health adjusts to this situation and treats them on a cost-effective basis. These folks, these individuals often face many challenges such as chemical dependency, chronic illnesses like diabetes and others, and unstable housing. Hennepin Health tries to identify the holistic needs of the individual, whether those needs happen to be medical care, housing, mental health treatment, or finding a job. Here are a couple of individuals who this innovative program has already helped. A 50-year-old Native American man from my district is chronically homeless and suffers from hepatitis C. He used the emergency room as his primary medical care. But this was only because he didn't have transportation to a clinic. He was entitled to a free bus pass, but didn't have an address to receive it. Hennepin Health connected him with a social worker to pick up his bus tickets, and now he's able to see a clinic for his health care, keeping him out of the emergency room, which is, of course, is the most expensive type of care and which you can't be rejected from for good reason, because it would be inhumane to do so. The program has also helped an African-American man in my district who has had a history of heart disease, kidney disease, and homelessness. Hennepin Health was able to connect him to housing providers, which helped him stay out of the emergency room as well. He is now able to get all of his medical and mental health needs addressed at a health care home. These are great success stories. People who are low income, who have serious health challenges, who don't have any health care, so they seek the health care of last resort, the emergency room, which happens to be very expensive to treat them at. This is not the most effective way, nor the most compassionate way to treat them. Ongoing, regular treatment from a provider is what's needed. Hennepin Health has saved money, and more importantly, has helped people, members of our society, Americans, get their health care needs met. As some cities have found, 1% of the individuals in a safety net program can often account for up to 1/3 of the cost because of this problem of ending up in the emergency room. By coordinating care for high-need individuals, health care programs can greatly reduce costs while also providing better care. While Hennepin Health program is new, it is extremely promising and has already demonstrated it can be a model for the nation. And I might add, Mr. Speaker, this is government, yes, government, delivering good service at an affordable, low cost by being smart. Chalk one up for the American taxpayer and people who are in chronic need of health care. Hennepin Health, Mr. Speaker, it's a good idea. I'm proud of it.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Woolsey, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, Americans filed their tax returns, sending the Federal Treasury funds for the government to perform vital functions. Unfortunately, much of that money, way too much of that money, continues to be wasted on a policy that has failed miserably. I'm talking about a policy that has lost the confidence of the American people whose taxes support it. A policy that has cost nearly 2,000 American lives. A policy that has done more to undermine our national security goals than it's done to make our nation safer. Of course, I'm talking about the war in Afghanistan. This past weekend brought yet more evidence that our continued military presence in Afghanistan, carrying a price tag of roughly $10 billion a month, is stirring up unrest and emboldening insurgents rather than providing security and stability. Beginning this last Sunday, the Taliban launched a series of bold, coordinated, and simultaneous attacks throughout Afghanistan, hitting the Parliament building and diplomatic sites throughout the country. Thankfully, there were limited casualties, and by many accounts, the Afghan security forces handled themselves with skill in response to the violence, which is very good news, because as the Afghans are better able to police and protect themselves, it's all the more reason to hasten our military withdrawal from Afghanistan. Every day that we continue our military occupation, Mr. Speaker, is another day that we breed resentment, that we inflame tensions, and create more impassioned enemies. Mr. Speaker, the American people are writing the check for this war. In fact, they just sent in their annual check this week. They deserve a better return on that investment. They deserve a set of policies that are more humane, more consistent with our best values as a nation, and more likely to advance our national security objectives. They deserve the kind of smart security approach I've been talking about for many years now. Instead of invasions and warfare, we need diplomacy. We need multilateral cooperation. Instead of military surges, we need civilian surges. Instead of troops with guns, we need to send humanitarian experts, experts that can help Afghanistan and other developing countries fight poverty, rebuild their infrastructure, educate their people, and so much more. Listen to this quote, Mr. Speaker. In today's ever-complex world, we must use all the tools of national security to achieve our objectives, including a strong State Department and other civilian-led agencies. Development and diplomacy keep us safe by addressing threats in the most dangerous corners of the world and by preventing conflicts before they occur. End of quote. That's an excellent explanation of smart security. But that's not Lynn Woolsey, and it's not the Out of Afghanistan caucus talking. It's from a letter to Congress signed by 80 retired military leaders, making the case not to cut USAID and arguing for a strong international affairs budget. The time is now, not in 2014, Mr. Speaker. The time is now to bring our brave troops home, to implement the compassionate and cost-effective smart security agenda that can keep our nation safe and it can keep peace in the world. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I spoke about a secret organization called ALEC, also known as the American Legislative Exchange Council. And I talked yesterday about how ALEC promotes model legislation written by its corporate members and disseminated to conservative state lawmakers around the country. The public whose votes elect these lawmakers to represent them are kept in the dark about the fact that their representative member is a member of ALEC. And the member or the legislative member goes on various retreats and junkets wherein the ALEC corporate members who pay tens of thousands of dollars a year to be members, whereas the legislators pay $50 a year. You can see the imbalance there. This is something that is funded by the corporations, special interest. The lawmakers, just to make it look good, have to pay $50 annually to join. We don't know who those lawmakers are, although we do know that 60% of the lawmakers in the entire United States of America are members of ALEC. And the taxpayers are probably the ones who pay the annual membership fee, at which, or with which, the members are then connected to corporate interests by way of ALEC committees. And these committees produce the model legislation that is then introduced by these same member legislators in their respective legislatures. And that was the way that the so-called stand your ground law, but it's really a shoot first, ask questions later bill. That's how it started in Florida. It was an ALEC-produced bill. It has now spread to 1/2 of the states in the United States of America. 25 states have adopted similar laws, despite the fact that self-defense has always been a defense available to people who find themselves in that situation. But the reason why they did this is because they wanted to produce more handgun sales. It's nothing but about money. And the NRA and the corporations that sell firearms through the retail outlets across the nation are benefiting, and but we have people dying in the streets because of these weapons. Now, also, so that's one committee. There's another committee that's been set up by ALEC, and it deals with the private prison industry. Mr. Speaker, the United States imprisons more than any other nation in the world. We currently incarcerate approximately 2.3 million people. America's high incarceration rate is not fitting for a nation which is routinely touted as the greatest in the world. Although high incarceration rates hurt the United States as a whole, it definitely benefits the private prison industry. In 2010, the two largest private prison companies, CCA and the GEO Group, received nearly $3 billion in revenue. That's taxpayer money. The for-profit prison industry is driven by the corporate members of the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. ALEC is a secretive organization that has advocated for harsh sentencing and detention laws that lead to mass incarceration. It provides state legislators with model legislation, and each year ALEC members introduce these bills in state houses across the country. This gives unparalleled access and authority to ALEC's corporate and legislative members, undermining the will of the people and the power of the ballot box. Private prisons have vested interests in maintaining and maximizing their profits. They are not concerned about public safety or rehabilitation or reducing recidivism. Those principles directly conflict with their bottom line and mantra, which is more prisoners and more money. Mr. Speaker, I will again be back to continue to discuss this issue. I discussed it yesterday. Today is another day. I think the American people need to know what's going on in the politics of America. And if we don't do something, we are all at risk for losing the rights that we as citizens are supposed to possess. Government of, by, and for the people, not for a special interest. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Kingston, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, the failed policies of the Obama administration continue to drag down the economy. The policies of stimulus programs, bailouts, crony capitalism, the Department of Justice investigating only what they choose worthy to be enforced, bowing to Saudi kings, going to China hat in hand asking for more money. These policies have brought down the economy. Indeed, the unemployment rate, which the administration says is 8.2%, that's not accurate at all. They simply got it down that low by omitting a whole lot of unemployed people from the unemployment category. There's about 4 million people who have given up looking for a job, and the Obama administration doesn't even consider them as being unemployed. In my opinion, there's 4 things we can do to address this, and we need to do it on a bipartisan basis. I have reached out to the White House. I will continue to. And even in an election year, it's far more important to put America first and party second. First thing we need to do is pass a budget. You know, right now, the national debt is over 100% of the gross domestic product. $15 trillion national debt and a $15 trillion economy. Indeed, we are on the road to Greece. For every dollar we spend, 40 cents is borrowed. The United States Senate under Harry Reid has not passed a budget in 3 years. That is the constitutional duty of the legislative branch of government. The House has done so. The House passes a budget. We had a great debate 2 weeks ago. We had a budget offered by the Democrats, one offered by the Progressive Caucus, one offered by the Congressional Black Caucus, one offered by the most conservative caucus, one offered by the Ryan Budget Committee. And we had a great debate, and we passed a budget. Now, the Senate doesn't like it. I understand that. Oh, footnote, we even offered the President's budget, which increases the debt $1.2 trillion, another $1.2 trillion, and not a single vote from Nancy Pelosi to John Boehner, not one vote for the President's budget. The same thing happened in the Senate last year, but I understand the Senate doesn't like our budget, they don't like the President's budget, but where is your budget? You've got to pass it, and if you would pass a budget in the U.S. Senate, we can hammer out our differences between the House and the Senate. Indeed, both parties will have to give, both bodies will compromise. That's always been the case. But it would send a huge international signal that America, the economic leader of the world, is serious about getting our hands on our debt. We are leading the way instead of falling to the demise of Greece, Spain, Portugal, and so many of the other troubled countries. So the first thing we need to do to change our economy around is to pass a budget. The second thing to do is to look at the regulatory burden, which is stifling new jobs, and instead of government bureaucracies going to the small businesses with this "I got you" attitude, we know you hate people, we know you hate consumers, we know you want to pollute the air, we know you want to poison the food. Maybe the federal government regulatory agency should go into the small businesses and say, we recognize what you're doing right, we want to encourage it, and where you're doing wrong, we're going to discourage it, and if you don't address it, we will fine you. But don't go to every business in America assuming they're guilty of something besides creating jobs and delivering goods and services to people. So we need to ease up and find the balance in the regulatory burden. Thirdly, we need to drill our own oil. And we need to encourage the new technologies of horizontal drilling, fracking, and all the great promises that are out there. We need to look at the example of Williston, North Dakota, which has brought its oil production from 200,000 barrels to 600,000 barrels in less than a year's period of time. Indeed, America could perhaps become an energy exporter. Not only would that be an economic boom, but the national security advantage of it would be an unbelievable sea change in the world stability today. Fourth and final, we need to have tax simplification. How many Americans within the sound of my voice fill out their own tax return? More and more people are turning to accountants and lawyers to figure out what the heck we owe Uncle Sam every April 15th. And when you pay an accountant $300 or $400 or $500 or $1,000 to figure out what you owe Uncle Sam, that's a tax in itself. Businesses spend lots of time avoiding taxes. We need a tax system that's certain, that's clear, that's concise and fair so that everybody understands it and everybody pays their fair share. Indeed, tax simplification would help turn the economy around. So, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time, but in my opinion, Democrats and Republicans have the moment right now to change the economic direction of America by passing a good, solid budget, by having balanced regulatory reform, drilling our own oil and having a good energy policy, and finally tax simplification. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
Pursuant to Clause 12, Paren A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess till the hour of 12 noon today.
And the House gavels out. Members will be back at noon Eastern for legislative work, and on the